All right. Thank you all for being here tonight. My name is Madeline. I am Rogue Farm Corps' collaborative farming specialist. Um, I'm sure many of you are familiar with RFC. If you are not, we've been around for the past 20 years, predominantly doing beginning farmer training programs throughout the state. And our newest branch of work is our collaborative farming program, which is me. Hi, I'm our collaborative farming program. These are sort of the different resources that we offer. We've just hit 2 years of offering this programming. And so we've been working on providing events like this, so networking and educational opportunities for farmers. Um, we have an extensive resource library on our website, and I will be dropping links to all of this later. We work one-on-one with farmers to connect you to professional resources. We try to help facilitate group dynamics, build cooperative capacity among farmers. And then our newest branch of programming, which I am the most excited about, is our collaborative farming consulting program. So that's the one I have in bold, the support and technical assistance. We received grant funding to offer one-on-one technical assistance to get your collaborative project off the ground. So, in the context of tonight's webinar, we're talking about equipment sharing. While projects like equipment sharing can provide cost benefit to farmers, they can also come at the cost of a lot of time, your time, which is money, and startup resources. And so, our collaborative farming consulting program is something of an answer to that. We can help kind of take some of that labor off your plate and provide our support and our expertise in this area to you. We also have a limited amount, but some free time with lawyers and accountants for qualifying projects so that if you have an idea of wanting to form some sort of like, let's say, equipment sharing co-op, but you feel like you need to talk to an accountant about how to make sure that that fits in with your business plan or make sure you have your tax questions answered, want your operating agreement looked over by a lawyer, we have some resources for that. And so if any of this is prompting ideas for you, we definitely encourage you to get in touch with us after this to learn more about that. So, why share equipment? I have three kind of main reasons that I've come across about why folks are interested in sharing equipment. Obviously, cost is one of the biggest ones. There was this interesting study done in Sweden um, that saw that even when using equipment at non-optimal times, which is something of a consequence when it comes to sharing equipment, sometimes you can't always use it exactly when you want to. Farmers still saved at least 15% on their operating costs over the course of the season. So, cost is a huge one, right? It's cheaper to co-purchase equipment than it is for you to buy a piece of equipment on your own. A little lesser emphasized point that I think is underrated, honestly, is labor resiliency. When you're sharing equipment, you're talking more to each other as you're exchanging the equipment, as you're meeting each other wherever it's stored. You're sharing tips about how to operate the equipment. You're learning more efficient ways to use it. You're experiencing or you're learning better ways to maintain it. There's more minds on repairs and that kind of thing. And we think of that as labor resiliency through knowledge sharing. There can also be opportunities for jointly contracting or hiring laborers to help utilize that equipment during peak seasons, which is also a form of labor resiliency. And then another underrated one that I think is incredibly important right now in this moment is relationship building. When you are participating in joint projects with people, you are building trust, you're building relationships, and that can really open the door for future collaboration in other aspects of farming. You could maybe end up co-marketing your project or co-marketing your products with other farmers that you share equipment with. Maybe you co-hire together. There's endless possibilities for how these relationships might be fruitful in other areas of your farm. Okay, so some models for equipment sharing. Something that we want to emphasize in these webinars are your entity options for different types of collaboration. For something like equipment sharing, there are so many ways it can take shape, and this is not an extensive list. I think informal arrangements are the most common. So folks who just happen to share a piece of equipment and there's not any sort of formality around it. That can come with a lot of risk and liability, though. It opens up a lot of opportunity for conflict and for relationship degradation. Um, we also have more formalized co-ownership. So two farmers pool resources together and buy something together. So they're both formal owners of it. Cooperatives and LLCs. So cooperatives are really common abroad. I have Kumas on here too, and those are a very well-established model for cooperative farm equipment ownership abroad. It's not really a huge part of American farm culture, but it works really well for farming communities in Europe and Canada. It's well documented. There's lots of resources for this that exist out there with details on how this model works, and I have a lot of those on our website. I think it's a really fascinating model that, I would love to see more stuff like that happen in the States. LLCs are a more flexible legal entity for co-owning equipment. I know of one farm in the Oregon area. They have three farms that are sharing land, and they're three separate businesses, but those three separate businesses also altogether own an LLC that owns their collective farm equipment. So anything that all three of them use, that LLC owns it. And so that's the sole purpose of that LLC. It exists strictly to own the farm equipment. So it's reporting a loss each year as that equipment depreciates. And there's other ways that you can use the LLC structure. I'm going to talk about an example um, on the next slide. And then we have nonprofits, tool libraries, soil water conservation districts. These types of entities, like NGOs or government agencies, can be really good hosts for equipment sharing projects. It helps take the labor and the cost of administration off the shoulders of farmers, which is huge. And if you're a farmer who's interested in wanting to do something like this, but you feel like you don't have the capacity, I encourage you to advocate to local organizations that might be amenable to hosting something like this and see if you can maybe get something going with them or if you can open up some possibility for something like this to happen near you. I did want to shout out that ORCAN, the Oregon Climate and Ag Network, I believe that's what the acronym is for. They host a Google Sheet that has information about every single soil and water conservation district in the state of Oregon that offers equipment for borrowing or for leasing. And I will drop that link again when I'm done sharing my screen. It also has information about soil testing, which is really cool. So while we don't really have a lot of like tool libraries hosted by the conservation districts, some of them do offer specific pieces of equipment for farmers to borrow at pretty low costs. All right. So I have two quick case studies that I wanted to share. And first, I'm going to take some water because it is so hot right now in my office. It's like 85 right now in Portland. Okay. So both of these case studies I pulled from, well, the first one is a more of a hypothetical. It's not a real case study. But the second one I have, I pulled from our website where I wrote up a larger thing about this, and there's links to learn even more about it. So again, I encourage you to follow the link if any of this interests you to our resource page on our website. I poured so much time and energy and love, and I only included things in there that I felt would be relevant to farmers because I'm a farmer myself and I don't want to waste your time. So the first kind of example I have in here is formalizing an informal arrangement. So I've met so many farmers, I know so many farmers who share equipment on a very informal basis. So let's say one farmer owns a tractor implement and they lend it out regularly to their two farm friends. Maybe they exchange it for like a six pack of beer or an occasional favor in return. Let's say one of their farmer friends is using it, and while they're using it, it breaks. So there was already some wear and tear on this piece of equipment, but it finally breaks while one particular farmer is using it. The owner's not able to know if it broke just from that wear and tear. Did it break because they were using it irresponsibly? Did it break because they were using it in a way inappropriate to how it's supposed to be used? At that point, whose job is it to pay for that repair? Whose job was it to pay for did those people borrowing it, did they own anything for maintenance on that wear and tear? This can cause conflict. It can have the potential to destroy relationships. And in my opinion, one of the worst parts about stuff like this is it sours people on the concept of collaboration at all. Um, and so even if you don't want or even need to start a whole other legal entity, like I'm not saying someone in this situation would need to like form an LLC to share their tractor implement, but we do highly recommend to have these conversations about maintenance, repairs, etc. beforehand and put that conversation down in writing for how you're going to manage these things. Just having that conversation ahead of time is an important preventative measurement against, relationships breaking down and conflict happening. And even better news for you. We have worksheets and resources for this. And if you want to go to the people who are borrowing your equipment and say, Madeline from RFC said that I should be doing this, you can get me on the Zoom call and I'll ask the hard questions and I can be the bad guy and write it down for you. Like that is a service we are more than happy to help offer to you, is to be the one in the room to sort of mediate these conversations and help make sure that everyone ahead of a conflict, you have a plan in action for what's going to happen in case of worst case scenario. My second case study is the Intervale Farm Equipment Company. So Intervale is a program in Vermont. They used to be an incubator. They are no longer an incubator, but there are still 7 farms that farm on their property. And so when they ceased to become an incubator, the incubator still owned the equipment, but the farmers wanted to own it themselves. And so the incubator sold the equipment to the farms. All of the farms, there's 7 of them, formed an LLC to purchase that equipment. So again, it's an example of an LLC existing strictly to own that equipment. There's a fee structure to check out the equipment. So unlike the other one I talked about, where they all own it and they just use it as needed, this one there's a fee structure because there's 7 farms. And then all members have a set amount of work hours that they have to do every year towards maintaining the equipment. And so an arrangement like this, I think, is best practice for larger groups like this. If you have like, 4+ farms who are all co-owning and co-utilizing multiple pieces of machinery. Um, and that what's nice about the LLC structure is it's really flexible and there's lots of different ways you can play with it to make it work for whatever sort of particular situation that you have going. You can also utilize the cooperative structure. There's little nuances to that, and again, if you're curious about it, we encourage you to reach out. We'd love to talk to you about it. Okay, that is everything that I wanted to share. Um, I shared 2 examples that I knew would not be sort of covered in our guest speakers today. So if any of this, the programming I was talking to you about, sounds interesting to you, there's my email there. Again, I'm going to be dropping links in the chat. Um, but at this point, I am going to zip it and hand it over to our first guest speaker, John Bliss. Thank you.
Madeline, that was really fantastic introduction. I love the way you were framing specifically the benefits of cooperative ownership in terms of community building and just sharing the struggles and the learnings that you obviously have when you are trying to share a piece of equipment. So I'm John. I farm in Maine. We have a flower farm called Broadturn Farm, and I'm really grateful to have been invited to participate this evening. We have a very specific example where the tool that we share is a steamer, a soil steamer, which is kind of more popular among flower farmers because of the high value of the crop and because we do a lot of greenhouse growing. The soil in those houses, that high real estate value, can get diseased, and soil diseases are kind of one of the bane of flower farming. That's one of our biggest struggles is soil disease. So a steamer, one thing I would add to the introduction is sharing equipment is one way to get around some of the risks of trying out something that's a little bit newer. Soil steaming is not a new technology at all, but it was popular before fumigants and herbicides were widespread. So it has a legacy, but it was new to us. It was new to farmers in my area. And so, I went to a couple presentations and I learned about how some of the promises of soil steaming, but it was too risky for me to go ahead and buy a steamer myself. They're quite expensive. We'll get into some of the costs in a minute, but so taking a risk was one of the factors in my decision making to organize around sharing. Um, there was a grant that I was looking at, um, the specialty crop uh, block grant. This was back in 2021. I saw a lot of in our area, we have a lot of houses that were uh, funded partially by NRCS, these like hoop house tunnels. A lot of growers were ended up with a lot of tunnels around here. And if some of the farmers in this conversation are familiar with the tunnel program, it's great for 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, but there's a honeymoon period that eventually ends, and you realize that, oh, growing in a tunnel is actually kind of challenging. There's some specific issues. One of them is winter weeds, and so we started to get a lot of chickweed in our tunnels, in addition to diseases that were just really persistent. So, um, like I said, a lot of our neighbors had tunnels, and so I thought this is a tunnel specific tool. Perhaps there'd be some pickup there from my neighbors. And so I applied for this grant, and I did it, as Madeline mentioned earlier, under the auspices of our Soil and Water Conservation District. So I basically wrote the grant for them. They were the sponsor, and they got the funds, and then I spent the funds. And so the soil steamer is a Sioux machine, as in the native tribe, S Sioux. And it was with the equipment, that the extra equipment like tarps and chains and hoses. It was about $36,700. That's a big chunk of change. And um, to be honest, if this was a straight up equipment sharing um, collaborative thing with just growers and not a grant, even that's like a bit too risky, I think, for me and my neighbors. So the grant softened this quite a lot for us, and I don't think we would have gone through with it without the grant. But um, that's what grants are for, experimenting. And part of the experiment was the sharing nature of this equipment. And so what I did is I came up with a concept, the sort of uh, 5 farms. If each farm had about 5 tunnels over the course of 5 years, we would use this machine enough to essentially have paid for it. So we were basically uh, sort of trying to prove the case that it could have this project could have existed without the grant. And so we were gonna we're gonna have use fees throughout the project, um, for each of the farms, with the goal of basically paying that money back to the Soil and Water Conservation District. And at the end of 5 years, they would have enough money to essentially duplicate the project with another group of farmers. That was the concept, and that's the grant that I wrote. Um, it didn't really pan out quite like that. We had some successes and some failures, um, which I'm happy to get into. I'm wondering if there are any questions at this point, or if I should keep on going. I'm not. Maybe Madeline, you could like give me a shout. Just interrupt me when the time seems like it's running. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think everyone would be interested to hear sort of like what changed, what caused a pivot in maybe your original plan, like what were those challenges and where's has the project sort of moved to since then?
Right. Right. Well, perhaps one of the faults of having a grant is you don't always have the same buy-in that you would if you were putting cash on the table. And so, although I got a pretty firm commitment from all 5 farms in my neighborhood, uh, 2 of them really weren't interested. Like when it came down to it, they were happy to put their name on the grant, but um, when it partially because we were actually like going to be collecting funds for the use of the machine, they eventually um, didn't want to like take the risk of buying the fuel, paying for the use, and sharing the responsibility of the equipment. And so 2 farms over the course of a year, the first year, kind of backed out, which was unfortunate. The other 2 farms tried it a few times, and the basically the uptake was not like where it should have been in order to like get on track for paying it off. So we kind of pivoted a little bit. We um, like advertised it a bit and got some other farms to try it out. And there was like a buy-in of what was it? I think it was like a basically $300 or something like that to be part of the cooperative, and then a use fee beyond that. And so so we started out trying to like get interest by renting it to people for those same costs. And if they wanted to use it again, then we said, well, if you want to use it again, then join our cooperative and be part of the club. And so we basically have achieved 6 or 7 farms that are on board and are planning on using it again. Um, but yeah, the goal of having enough use over the course of a year or over 5 years to pay it back did not pan out. Um, so that was uh, I'm not sure how I would reorganize the project from the start to avoid attrition that we experienced. But I think part of it is it is a new technology, and essentially like we were relying on some of our nonprofit educational organizations in our area to sort of make the test case for us that, this is a great idea and look at all this evidence that says that it is going to make your tunnel production so much better. Um, and, that's a slow process. Like, education is one foot in front of the other. It takes time. Um,
Absolutely.
and
I see a good question from Penny in the chat who says that it sounds like you already had an existing relationship to pursue the project with your neighbors, it sounds like. Was there any sort of coalition building to assemble interest from farmers, and what was that process like? And then she also added, and you can answer these however, if you feel called to, what did leadership for this project look like, and how was that initial decision making and pivoting handled?
yeah, Um, I'll say, yes, we had a relationship with these 5 original farms. They're basically our closest farm neighbors. And that felt ideal to me because although this thing was on a trailer and it was easy to tow around, I didn't really want to put it on the highway too much. Um, Another thing I kind of like brushed over was that the soil steaming technology specifically seemed like the perfect equipment sharing tool because it's not bound by seasonality. Well, it's not bound by weather. Let's just say like it can be raining outside or snowing and you can use it. Um, and some farmers would want to use it in the fall, and some farmers in the winter, and some in the spring, some in the summer. So depending on different production, it could be shared very easily. I have been wanting to do equipment sharing for a long time, and this was the first piece of equipment that came across my awareness that was like, wow, this is really gonna jumpstart, a collaborative mindset among my neighbors. Didn't really do that. I had tried in the past, those paper pot transplanters, when those were brand new, that also was kind of a risk for a lot of growers. Like, not that it was super expensive, but yeah, it was like a whole system that was kind of risky. So that was one of our first shares with a neighbor, our closest neighbor, and that worked out great. It was super informal. Um, and eventually they ended up buying one for themselves. And um, yeah, I guess we threw them some cash to cover the costs. And so, uh, yeah, other equipment that I covet, like a no-till, um, a no-till seeder, or like for cover crop. It's just the time constraints of usage seem to me to be a barrier. This is all before I learned about some of those resources that you shared, Madeline, like the stuff in Europe, the Kumas is was really mind blowing to me when I read about that. But anyway, this steamer thing seemed to me like a low hanging fruit. In terms of the leadership of the project, it really was me, and it remains me. In other words, the Soil and Water Conservation District, um, if I asked them if they owned a soil steamer, they would probably shake their heads. And you know, that was, again, that was a few years back, and I think staff has transitioned. Um, they do get a check once in a while from our cooperative, but they're not really interested in owning a piece of equipment or managing it or maintaining it. And so I said, that's fine. Like, we'll, as long as you're the sponsor for the grant and you're not putting any money in, um, there's not a big risk for them. Although at the end of the day, it is theirs, and they pay for the license plate on the trailer. And yeah, if something really wrong goes on, I will ask them to pull money out of the funds that they've earned over the past 4 years.
That's
Um,
really cool. I think it's a very creative use of their organizational capacity for to get what you and your neighbors needed. Um, I had one more question for you before I hand it over to Doug, just so we make sure we have enough time. And then if anyone else has questions, at any point, put it in the chat, and then we also will have time at the end if you want to come off mute. But you've mentioned multiple times that this is a cooperative, and I was just wondering if it is like a legal cooperative or if it's a cooperative just in name only.
it's a name only.
Okay,
Yeah.
so is every farm that pays the fee then just like a member of this cooperative? Do you have a legal entity for it at all?
No legal entity. I asked them to sign a document that felt really official. And again, they are our neighbors. So if they, and everyone's been super generous. Like, uh last year someone was using it and the boiler or the burner needed a new part, needed to be serviced, and so they just like didn't pay the use fee and they paid instead for the technician to come and clean it.
Mm.
That was like just an example of just flexibility and generosity when you're dealing with neighbors. I totally understand that it could go sideways pretty easily. um, and I love the idea of covering my ass with some kind of legal framework. But that's not really my field of expertise. So I would be your number one customer if to offer that to me. I'd be like, yeah, yeah, let's make it formal. Let's just get it all on paper and do it
Yeah,
that
I
way.
wish if you were in Oregon, then I'd say come right to us. We got the resources for you. Okay, like I said, if anyone else has more questions, you can put them in the chat or you can wait until the Q&A. But I wanted to make sure that we had enough time for both speakers, so I'm going to hand it over to Doug now.
Yeah, thank you. This is great. I'm learning so much. It's such an honor to like come and join it. And I'm going to share a bit, but I'm learning a lot from both your presentations. And I think it's such a nice segue too, to be here representing a soil water conservation district from what's already been shared. So I'll go into that. And to say too, from what John's experience was, we had a group of Detroit farmers that were pursuing a grant for a soil steamer just this year and asked for a letter of support. So It's great to hear different successes with that. Um, I'm curious too, as I get my screen shared, I have some slides I'll share. But if in the chat, if you want to share like how you work with your local conservation district and if they have equipment sharing or rental programs, I'd love to hear. I'm always looking at how other folks do it and learning. So if you can do that, I'm going to share my screen now. If I can find it. Share. And, let's see. Cool, looks good. I don't see the chat. Maybe I'll pop it. There it is. Okay, if something comes up, just let me know. I'm glad to stop at any moment. But so to introduce myself, I'm Doug Reith. I'm the resource specialist with the Washtenaw County Conservation District. We're based in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And this is, I guess I'm curious to look at the chat before. Did anything interesting come up of working with conservation districts? I hope, I guess keep talking and then we'll circle back around to anything there. But I also hope as you're listening to this, you get inspired, as John did, to work with your conservation district as a source for cultivating some of these relationships with equipment. Um, yeah, and to say too, I have some slides I presented at it's called the Stewardship Network Conference, and I'd love to share about that too. I'll put it in the chat there. Um, I did kind of a reduced set of slides from what I presented in January that was tackling invasives with tool banks. So there's kind of a different focus maybe than this topic, but hopefully it's still insightful for soil water conservation districts. And to say too that this has been a pet project for me. I love being able to be representing a local government and using our shared resources to drive engagement in land management and people building more relationship with their land. So it's been a fun thing. And the more I talk to people about it, the more I learn and we improve. So let's see. Yeah, a little bit about me. Notably, I have a computer science degree, and then I went into organic farming urban farming in Detroit, and I was also a cut flower for a time, as all of us who've talked are, um, and then land stewardship. And so I've bounced around a lot. A lot of what I do is plant sales, but we run this equipment program as well. As a conservation district, we support our residents and landowners with conservation management, wise use of resources that looks different in every county, every conservation district, meeting the needs locally. So we're no different than that. I'll just say too is that in Michigan, we have very little state funding. We're unique in Washtenaw that we have a local millage that helps us do programs like this, and that's very few in Michigan have that. So I'll go over a little bit of how we developed a tool bank within a conservation district and equipment program. The big picture is we as a government agency providing services and resources, we make these tools and equipment accessible to our local landowners and producers for conservation and agricultural purposes. These tools, what we select to share is based on community recommendations and surveys and assessments that we do. And we make it available to everyone in the county, but also as conservation districts vary so much regionally, we support anyone who wants to use the tools. Sometimes there's additional fees, like what John had mentioned about transporting equipment takes a toll on it. So we try to take that into account. Our focus is on conservation and agricultural tools that are specific, kind of unique, not commonly owned, not things that you can just rent from big box stores and this and that. So there's kind of a niche there that we try to focus on, and I'll kind of share some of the tools. A lot of conservation districts, most, looking around the country, a lot of them have no-till drills, all sorts of, big ag districts will have a lot of big equipment that they lend out. We used to have some funny old tree planters and such. When I started in 2020, we had just got a millage for the first time. We started this program back up from nothing, and I'll kind of talk through that. In Michigan, mostly we have no-till seed drills at districts. We have a few tree transplanters, some herbicide tools and planting tools. We did a survey at one point to see, like, when we were developing our program of like who. I'm also my computer science background. I like data stuff, so I crunch the numbers to make good decisions. So we looked at it and we said, oh, everyone's got a no-till drill, which was previously our Department of Natural Resources provided these drills to districts. So a lot of them have it through that, but we had to go and purchase one, which, costs, it was around $20,000 for Truax drill, which was a lot, but we were able to, as through our millage money, do that. Very few hand tools at districts, although that's starting to change as more of them are finding the benefits, which I'll share my experience with. A little bit of a timeline since 21, we were looking at building a tool program. I launched with our no-till drill we purchased, and then we had different systems for managing how we all share this and schedule it. Initially, we used something called FormSite where people would request a time and then I put it into Google Calendars. It was very clunky. In the last 2 years, then we used the platform called MyTurn. So people could put in reservations of the equipment. So it reduced the overhead of the staff, like scheduling all of that, and people can reserve based on when the tools are available. As we then had an online system, more people donated tools with us. We bought a few more tools. We bought a tree transplanter that you pull behind a tractor. And then the last 2 years, we've been developing a partnership to have a second tool hub site. So a really amazing farm called Growing Hope Urban Farm. They focus on food justice and sustainability in Ypsilanti, Michigan. They had just launched a tool shed, and we partnered with them, and then saw the opportunity to have a shared platform with multiple locations. So that's what we just launched this year. That's their shed there. We're still developing like a logo for whatever that's worth, but they have a lot of community and small garden tools. We have a lot of conservation tools, so we're kind of working together to make those things available throughout our area, more accessible to people who aren't going to drive very far for tools. And we've had a good amount, I guess the next slide shows. So over the last few years, just as we've offered more tools and more people are aware of us, and now more locations, we've seen an increase. The orange is this quarter from what is it? I guess April through June is our biggest season, and we're getting a lot more participation and more activity, engagement in this program. So it's fun, and it's like a gateway. People borrow a tool and then they're engaged with us in a lot of other ways. Um, the previous presentation was more focused on invasives removal. We use these polar tools. They are the catalyst to the whole program. Like they're out constantly. People love these tools. Again, just another look at like we have polar tools, planting tools, pruning tools, soil testing tools, herbicide, but the polar tools get a lot of action. I have a picture. Here's some of the Extractigator, Uprooter, Polar Bear. There's all these funny manufacturers with pun names. So we offer a lot of these tools, many manufacturers of the different tools, which is kind of fun to offer various ones, and landowners can borrow them and like learn what they like the most, and then often they end up buying their own if they really need, if they have a ton of invasives that they're going to keep working on every year. So it creates, it kind of jumpstarts people to not make that kind of initial cost risk. They can borrow things before they buy. Again, we offer this many soil. We have a soil pH tester now. So the soil compaction tester is great for like checking the hard pan, soil probe, a lot of different things the more engagement drives more requests and more opportunities to support our community. This was kind of mentioned by John too. I know I'm just flying through these things and it's a lot on there, but these two humps, it's just the seasonality of a lot of this, and especially like the no-till drill and our tree planter. The tree planter is so weather dependent. If the soil's wet, they can't plant. If the no-till drill, if like there's a good week or two, it's like everybody wants to use it at the same time. So that's a big challenge in sharing big equipment. And then otherwise, all these hand tools, there's just really obvious when people are using them the most. So we have to be more operational at those times. Um, Over the years, we've sourced from various methods, buying from distributors of tools, different manufacturers. Again, once we had this thing rolling and engaged our residents, people started giving us offering tools, partnerships with invasive species management and other organizations that we partner with have also supported us to develop this. Um, this is kind of the nitty gritty, boring slide. Over time, we've developed legal contracts that people sign when they're borrowing the tools. We have payment systems that we take cash, check, or card. There's fee structures for rentals. The drill is by acre, the tree planters by day. All of our hand tools we're able to offer for free, but it could, if you're doing this as a nonprofit or LLC or something, you could be charging a rental fee to support some of the costs. Damage cleaning fees, late return, that doesn't happen too much, but you want to make sure that you're disincentivizing bad use of the equipment. Um, and yeah, and then there's a lot, we've written SOPs to help train our staff. Conservation districts have a hard time keeping staff, so we want to make sure that they can train easily, and provide consistency for the program. We're at a real capacity for where we have a couple equipment parked in a parking lot and then a closet and a shed that's kind of at capacity of our stuff. So we're looking at how we're limited at that point, and we're going to try to see where we can go to better serve with more space and maybe another shed or something. And then there's just the regular tool sharpening, maintenance, fixing, part replacement, costs and time that come up as we learn the tools. All that is as to be expected, but I can deep dive into any of those things too. I mentioned about the platforms. There's one called MyTurn. We found it pretty clunky. Uh, but again, you can put all your information there. The rental rates can be built in, and the scheduling makes it really easy. We went to one called Lend Engine. It's based out of UK, but it's way more intuitive, and we have multiple sites through it, and so far so good. I definitely recommend this one if you are looking to like digitize your system of scheduling, and if you have many tools. Both of which are free at a basic intro level. Um, this is just a kind of cost. I know cost is usually a consideration. This is as a government agency, it's mostly our staff time. Like that's the biggest. Obviously, the $20,000 to get the drill was a big upfront cost, but that operationally, it's just the staff time, and then I think it was $300 a year for the software. The slide is just chaos, but so it's mostly that's my you got to pay the people or have some kind of time sharing or time bank that everybody's contributing in some way. Um, and then we've just had so many different success stories of people doing work days and sharing the equipment and all this over time, which has been really fun. And as I said, it also drives engagement with our sales. People become volunteers. They become interested in our board. So building relationships is like, having one puller tool builds so many relationships. You get so many people use it during the year. At this point, we're evolving, trying to build more awareness. A lot of people in Michigan still don't know what a conservation district is, let alone our rental program. I want to make it more accessible. A lot of people are limited. Our office hours are 8 to the same time people work, so I want to make it outside of office hours, partnering with libraries potentially. This really neat shelving system is a self-service. That's a dream to have a self-service tool system. Or even we do with our big equipment, we'll get the contract signed off and have somebody as the key that they can pick up equipment when needed. So making it available that way. More education, as John said, like education is a slow but very necessary when people are using equipment and want to use it properly and not mismanage it. But that's critical to have good resources on that. And then we're trying to make more efficient operations for our staff and better storage, like I said. So that was a lot. Visions for the future to have more peer-to-peer support. Like we can be a third-party intermediary for people supporting each other with equipment and rentals. We have a lot of volunteers in our sales, and they could be doing work days or advising on equipment, providing that service. So, and we're developing more hubs to have different equipment in different places to have more local access. So that's all that. And hopefully it stimulated some questions. I'm glad to answer and not run my slides any longer. So I'll stop that. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I'm really appreciating having both like the farmer perspective and then also more of like the, agency org perspective. Um, I'm gonna open it up for Q&A. Penny, I saw you put a question in the chat and then it was covered a little bit. I'm wondering if you had a more specific angle or if you want to come off mute and elaborate on that question. Otherwise, I can read it.
I think a lot of it got addressed. We're trying to support our local SWCD and starting an equipment share program, and they're encountering a lot of the considerations that have been highlighted by Doug. One of the sticking points is having adequate staff who are skilled enough in the equipment maintenance and repair and being able to train people how to use it. I'm curious, you had mentioned establishing SOPs to train new staff on the rental program. I'm curious as to like how your SWCD manages that sort of equipment specialization piece.
Yeah, we've documented a lot, and we have certain staff that get trained for, especially for like the no-till drill. There's a lot to know about it and to advise people who are maybe using it for the first time. And so we have that's kind of more limited that only certain staff can support those rentals. Um, and then the hand tools and such, we have a more general process that the staff can support. But I'm glad to share. You can look and find most of our contracts on our website. I'll share that too. But I'm glad to share what like the SOPs that we have is like an example that you could build off of or just understand like kind of the things that we've considered and added over the years to our contracts and then internal processes as well. We have a legally binding equipment rental contract that the big equipment goes out with. We also have an agreement contract that's a lot of more the softer stuff of like we're asking people to use it in certain ways and a check. We even send them with a checklist of like the things they need to do before they return it. Like some of which is obvious, but it helps to be consistent if you have different staff checking it out to have those lists that don't rely on somebody remembering everything. Penny loves a checklist. Yes. Yeah. It looks like Nicole
Yeah.
has
Yeah,
a hand
Nicole.
up.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, I just decided to jump in because my question is related, and I'll piggyback on that. I'm from an SWCD in Penny State, north and near Portland, and our equipment rental program is currently in flux because we just discovered that we are breaking the law actually in transporting it on the road in the way we have. This is a no-till drill. And we are required to tow this on a trailer, which we don't own, and a lot of risk aversion generally amongst our board around letting, clients come in, like you said, come after hours with a key, like that wouldn't fly here. And I'm just wondering if you think that's just going to be different, district to district, or if those are like real concerns that you've overcome somehow, or if you've run into
Yeah.
anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the district to district, the board culture and dynamics can be so different. We're our ever since we've had a millage in our district, we went from 2 people to about 14, and it's kind of an entrepreneurial energy that we were just like, let's do these things, and the board's very supportive. But with the risk of like transportation, the person signs all the contracts before they take it out, and we have it's a slow moving vehicle, so people have to move at 20 miles an hour. A lot of people get pulled over taking our drill on the road. It happens. And mostly the cops are like, what is that? And they explain it and it's no problem. Um, but we're learning, I think it's best to, dot your I's and cross your T's to be cautious, for whatever and follow local laws. I maybe run and gun a little loose, and hopefully I don't learn too bad. But we're so far so good. I find that in most cases, the folks who are engaging with conservation districts, um, at least in my experience, are very supportive of what you do, and they take care of things pretty well. But I know in some places people will use and abuse things too. So part of that is also just building a relationship to understand, you know, the people who are using it and if you trust them or not. There's a lot of personal assessments in that way. So I don't know. That's my personal take on it, I guess.
Thank you. Anyone else looking out for raised hands? Or you can just come off mute.
Something that came to mind too is that for soil and water conservation districts, we previously had a model many years ago that we had an equipment manager. It was just a part-time role for a farmer who hosted the equipment on his farm, managed the rentals, and got a certain cut of the fees, but the district owned the equipment. So I'm looking to get back to maybe that where we have a farmer who's like, well connected, knows the community, can provide the services with his own tractor, that kind of thing. So enabling key community members with the resources to do the work instead of hosting it internally when it comes to big equipment seems to be a better model that we used to have and I want to get back to. Um, but yeah, for any soil water conservation districts, if you don't take anything else away, get some polar tools. If you have invasive woodies, get some polar tools and you get a lot of engagement through those. It's a cheap entry cost. So
Well, I have one more, like I guess we have 5 more minutes, so I'll ask one more question unless last chance to raise your hand. But before I ask the question, I am going to drop a link in the chat to a survey for all of you on here. Um, this webinar, my work, everything we do is powered by grants. We've been talking about grants. They're very important to what we do. And grantors and funders love data and they love surveys. So I'm going to drop that in the chat. And I would really appreciate it's 5 questions. You just click, it's the ranking 1 to 5, 5 questions. And it would be so helpful for us. And I will be emailing you to bother you about it. But if you fill it out now, then I won't bother you. So I'm going to drop the link to that. But my question for both of you, um, John, like from your perspective as a farmer, what do you think helped in getting sort of your soil and water conservation district on board with this project that you had and other farmers? And then Doug, from your perspective, like if a farmer was interested in coming to you for a project like this, what would sort of be helpful in the way that they present it to get y'all on board?
I was on my conservation district's board for a while. So I was kind of known to them. And yeah, the director there was pretty sympathetic to farming. We're in suburbia. Our county includes the city of Portland, Maine. So their staff is mostly geared towards runoff, urban runoff and stuff like that. So this was like an attempt to sort of bring the heart of the Soil and Water Conservation District back from the dead. But it was just like 1 or 2 staff members that were interested and focused on agriculture. Most of the other staff was dealing with homeowners and commercial sites and water quality stuff. Super important. But if we were in a more agricultural part of the state, perhaps it would have been easier. I also had just in New Hampshire, the Cheshire County Soil and Water Conservation District has been a bit of a trailblazer for equipment sharing. And that's a link that we could put in the chat as well. They have online, they have their library and some SOPs and a bunch of helpful information, some of which I scraped for my project because they also have a soil steamer. And I think they just rent it out. I don't think it's not like a cooperative at all. Well, I guess neither is ours, but yeah, so I took inspiration from a neighboring district and I pushed pretty hard in our county for it to happen. And I also said, you don't have to worry about it. It'll be at my farm. I'll maintain it. I'll manage it. I might charge you for some of my hours, but honestly, I don't do that as much as I probably should. Yeah. And getting farmers to get involved yeah, I wasn't super successful at that, but we're still at the beginning of the lifespan of this piece of equipment. So I'm hopeful that the word will go out and people will start to report back positive things and we'll get repeat customers and we'll move, to a more active phase. Although I don't imagine we would build on our equipment library, really. It just yeah, the culture isn't really there.
That makes sense. That's something I hear a lot is, I mean, and it's something we're trying to work on too, is like building that culture to make these projects more successful in the long run. Um, we have one more minute, Doug, if you wanted to go and answer my question.
Yeah, yeah, how farmers can work with us. I think, I love what John said too. Like if you're on the board, you can help create the culture and the direction. And I know it sounds like a lot, but it's worthwhile to get engaged with your conservation district. And I think if you're gonna try to pitch something, do the upfront work like John did, like draft the grant, have it, have proven need with community signatures of people who will engage, and even with that attrition, like, that's expected in some sense. I recently had a hop farmer who, he said, if we had a harvester, we would save these 4 hop farms that are going under. And I was like, well, get me all of them on board of like them that they want to do this and give their signatures and write out what they need. So like if you can prove a need, community, like getting that engagement, it's possible. I think overall we need to shift out of this like fiercely independent compartmentalization of ownership in so many facets of our life, but this is one way we can. And I know there's the risk, but then there's so much more, like Madeline had introduced, with like the community building and resource sharing and all that. So the potential's there. And if you did want my SOPs or files or anything, just email me if you need anything. But it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you both so much for your time. Thank you, everyone who was here. I will be sending out a follow-up email with the recording and all of the different resources and links we talked about. So if you missed anything in the chat, I will be following up with that. And again, please take the survey because I will bother you about it. And I hope you all have a wonderful evening. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.